Tuesday, November 3rd, 1868, was an election day unlike any other. South Carolina and 7 other Confederate states had re-entered the Union in time for the election. But white gangs terrorized black voters in New Orleans, and Republicans in Georgia and Louisiana had to abandon campaigning altogether.
African Americans had to arm themselves. They had to go to the polls in large numbers. In some cases, African Americans have to gather together the night before an election. They sleep out in the woods, and they try to figure out when to go to the polls, when there'll be the fewest whites at the polls, so they'll actually be able to deposit their ballots.
Nothing could staunch the tide. Remarkably, 500,000 black men cast their votes.
A look at the events surrounding America's first presidential election following the conclusion of the Civil War, which is part of the new 4-hour PBS documentary series entitled Reconstruction: America After the Civil War. Joining us now, one of the film's executive producers and host, Henry Louis Gates, Jr. He's also author of the new book entitled Stony: The Road, Reconstruction, White Supremacy, and the Rise of Jim Crow, and co-author of the book for young readers, Dark Sky Rising, Reconstruction and the Dawn of Jim Crow.
Professor, you've been very busy. Obviously, a lot of projects before you, but I am so excited about your projects on Reconstruction, because it is one of the least understood parts of American history. It was an exhilarating time, yes, right after the war, but soon became a terrifying time. Explain why you got involved in this project.
Well, did you study Reconstruction when you were in school?
Not enough.
No, somehow Lee surrenders at Appomattox, and we cut to Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. If Lincoln freed the slaves, why do we need a Civil Rights Movement? And what has happened is that the history of Reconstruction, the glorious period of America's second founding, remember Lincoln's phrase, the new birth of freedom, this glorious period between 1865 and 1877 has been lost to many of our history books. And during that time, 16 black men were elected to the Congress, including 2 United States senators. And black men got the right to vote. In the summer of 1867, which I call Freedom Summer, 80.5% of the freed slaves registered to vote in 10 of the 11 Confederate states. Think about that. And in 1868, they cast 500,000 votes for Ulysses S. Grant. Grant won overwhelmingly in the Electoral College, but he only won by 300,000 popular votes. So effectively, black men had elected the President of the United States. During this time, we got birthright citizenship. We got equal protection under the law, regardless of race, and black men got the right to vote. But after 1877, a wave of white supremacy rose to crush the movement. So by 1901, the last Reconstruction congressman bid farewell to the United States Congress.
Well, and it's interesting you bring up Ulysses Grant and the question you asked me, because I've been reading history books, biographies my entire life. It wasn't until I read Chernow's book on Grant that I understood that even halfway through Ulysses Grant's term, he started to pull away from being a reformer on Reconstruction. And from that point on, all of the work of Lincoln, all of the work of the reformers, all of the work of those black men that you were talking about that so courageously went out to vote, to change their country, it all dissipated.
It all dissipated. And it's a myth to think that it was only the South rising again. You're absolutely right. It was confluence of events. The North and the South grew weary of Reconstruction. Grant initially suppressed the Ku Klux Klan. Remember, the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery was ratified on December 6, 1865, about the same time that the Klan is born. And Grant suppresses the Klan in the early years of his administration. But after that, his re-election and the Panic of 1873, which is officially called the Great Depression, interest in the North grew weary as well. Do we really need to commit all these resources for these former slaves? Didn't we free them? They should be on their own. Can't they stand on their own 2 feet? And so starting in 1890, the former Confederate states had started constitutional conventions that suppressed the black vote. I'll give you a dramatic example. In 1898, there were 130,000 black men registered to vote in Louisiana. By 1904, that number had been reduced to 1,342. Think about that.
And that happened in large part because the terror campaigns, because of the Klan, because governments weren't doing their jobs? Is this what we're going to also read about in Stony the Road?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Look, voter suppression and a very conservative Supreme Court that in 1883 declared the Civil Rights Act of 1875 unconstitutional. So think about it. 12 years of black freedom followed by an alt-right rollback and a president who refused to renounce white supremacy, Andrew Johnson. Does this sound familiar?
Well, I was just going to bring up that moment. What parallels do you see to today's climate, where we're seeing acts of white nationalism, white supremacy, violence attached to it? Those numbers are rising, according to statistics. How is that? What roles did the election of Barack Obama play to this? And then now, is President Trump stoking those fears and those violence? It's the perfect parallel. The reason that Dylan McGee and I decided to do this series now was because 8 years of black freedom, as it were, under Barack Obama basically drove a lot of people crazy. And we saw this rise of white supremacy that, I don't know about you, but I thought had been long buried. It's like a bad Dracula movie, man. You thought, damn, aren't you dead? Didn't we put a stake in your heart? And then it comes back. So that the closest historical parallel to what we're seeing today with the rise of white supremacy as a backlash to the Obama administration is the collapse of Reconstruction. And that's why I wrote the book, and that's why we did this series.
So, Professor, let me ask you, are you a bit more hopeful, though, where we are today, the results of 2018, the demographic changes that are happening in this country? Do you see the rise of Donald Trump and these forces that we're so concerned about, do you see that more as a death rattle, as perhaps white supremacists' last stand before the new, we called it the Obama coalition, the Obama majority, before that really is felt in America in a permanent way?
Well, if we had lost the House in the last election, I would really be worried. But fortunately, we didn't, and now we have checks and balances. But I'm still worried about a very conservative Supreme Court. Think about affirmative action is under attack. The right of a woman to have an abortion is under attack. The lesson of Reconstruction is that things, values, principles that we think are permanent actually are quite fragile. And I want to trumpet the fact that the black community was alive with participation in the electoral process 2 years after the abolition of slavery, to regenerate the desire to vote and to participate in the next election within the African American community, and by extension throughout the other minority communities in the United States. Casting a vote was the real black power, and that's what can make a difference.
The first 2 hours of the new PBS documentary, Reconstruction, America After the Civil War, premieres tomorrow night. Henry Louis Gates Jr., thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor.
His books, Stony the Road, Reconstruction, White Supremacy and the Rise of Jim Crow, and Dark Sky Rising, Reconstruction and the Dawn of Jim Crow, available now. And that does it for us this morning. Stephanie Rule picks up the coverage right now.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.